Moved. Right.
It's recording now.
Amazing. So thank you, ladies. Give me 1 second. And I just want to welcome you to this wonderful masterclass. Where can I find my... Okay, I'm gonna hand over to Shona. Shona, over to you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So first of all, hello and welcome. Uh, Thank you for doing the um, acknowledgement to country, Faith. I had one of my own set up, but I'm always happy to hear how other people acknowledge where we are. We're on Gadigal land, so thank you for that. Before I start, I just wanted to let you know who you're listening to and set up the next conversation. I'm a senior consultant for a company called Catalyze APAC. We're a social enterprise, and pretty much we're quite boutique in that the only thing we consult in is decision making, right? And Faith invited me to come along because one of the areas that's really, really close to my heart is the changes in the way I made decisions before and after 50.
Mm.
Right? Like that was kind of, I had one way of making decisions, and then and then it really did change after 50, right?
Mm.
So a little bit about myself. It's my birthday this Thursday, and I'm coming up to 60. Yay!
Yay.
And and I'm Jamaican as a heritage, but I'm an Australian, and I've been a mother, or I am a mother. I've been a wife. I've had a number of different careers, and mostly in the area of being with other human beings, communication, HR, that kind of stuff. So people and culture. So that's who I am. And I wanted to, I'm really excited about having this conversation
Mm.
because it was a really big deal for me. It was a
Mm.
really big deal for me when two things happened. As I was coming up to 50, um, I really confronted that I wanted the second half of my life to be equally as empowering and great and as important as the first half of my life. Right. So that was one thing. And then the second thing was I really confronted that in my youth, I had really endless energy and time, and I threw that at life. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't have a lot of other things, but I had a lot of energy and time, and I threw that into my life and used it like it was my currency. And then I came up to kind of 50, and I noticed I didn't have, like with menopause and that, I didn't have as much time and energy as I'd had beforehand. And so suddenly that endless currency that I had to really deal with. Actually, I have constraints in that area. And I really wanted to decide what am I going to spend my time and energy on, given that it's now limited.
Mm.
Another one that happened was, of course, changing my personal values over time. The personal values of me in my 20s and 30s were, make money, get successful. I don't know, I was pretty shallow, I suppose. And then in my 30s and 40s and 50s were parenting, right? And then I kind of got to the end of parenting, and I was like, well, oh my God, I haven't actually even looked at myself as something other than a parent for 25 years. Uh, what am I, what do I value now? Like, what do I think about now? What do I think is important now? So that was a big one. And then the biggest one, and perhaps the one that was most upsetting and confronting, was how the world viewed me.
Mm.
Something happened around that age where whatever it was that I depended on before that time and the relationship that the world had with me, like how educated I was, how powerful I was, like just all kinds of things, how attractive I was, all this world view of me suddenly shifted. And I had this experience with myself and my friends of maybe fading.
Mm.
I don't know. It wasn't that I was fading, but the world's view of me was like less vital. Right. So I wanted to really look at those things. So my commitment in this conversation is that we kind of look at those different things through the lens of decision making, and perhaps that will give you some value. If you haven't already had those kind of conversations for yourself, maybe it's time for you to answer those questions for yourself. So that's really why I'm in this conversation. Anybody else willing to talk about, what had you come? Or perhaps in the chat? Oh, I'm about faith. I'm probably about to undermine what you said before, which is I really like to have conversations. So I'm totally okay with people being off mute and us actually just interrupting each other like real women do. Right? So do not feel like you need to be on mute to hear something profound from me. Think of it more about like we're in a coffee shop and we have this opportunity to be with some glorious other women and, we're talking about something that's quite a challenging conversation. So anybody else have anything that they're here?
Hi.
Yes. Hi, Kelly.
Yeah. Hi, Shona. Sorry, I was a few minutes late. I'm actually working today, but I didn't want to miss this session because it's I'm turning 52 in a couple of weeks, and everything you just said completely resonates with me. It's a very confusing time of life, isn't it? Because of everything you've just said. I'm completely in the process of trying to reevaluate everything, I think, because of time and energy. I don't have the energy that I did even 5 or 10 years ago. I just don't.
Yes.
And I have to just acknowledge that in myself. I can't go on at the same pace physically. Mentally, that's another story. Menopause.
To be honest, mentally we're coming into our own.
Yeah, that's right. There's strengths there, but there's, you get tired and whatnot. But so, whether I need to change careers or reduce hours or things like that. But you're right. I don't know if the world's perceiving me different or if I just think the world is perceiving me different. But I definitely feel that as well. So, and it's hard to deal with. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And when I say the world perceives me different, that's everything from my children no longer think I'm godlike.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. Like I've suddenly gone from being godlike to being like old-fashioned.
Yeah.
All the way through to just at work, what do you wear? Like even those conversations, like fashion is not really designed for people of my age.
No,
that's what I mean by worldview.
Yeah, I need comfortable shoes 24/7.
Exactly.
My feet don't cope. But I felt like a super mum when I was 40. Like I would just take on anything and everything. Like I just had energy to deal with it and I wanted to do it all. But I'm not a super mum anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's very, very good. Excellent. Yeah. So that's perfect. Yeah. Well, hopefully you're in the right spot.
Yeah.
Because I do think that it's a great time to reevaluate. Right? And there's a little bit of an insanity about trying to fulfill on the same goals that you had when you were in your 20s now. Do you know what I mean? Like without that reevaluation, I think it's not really a game of do more, better, different. It's really a game of identifying what the you now wants for life, right? If that communicates. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for jumping in. As I said before, I am totally okay with people just jumping in about anything. So, because I really I'm not a very good facilitator. I'm much better conversationalist, right? So, thank you. So anyway, this conversation and the reason why I wanted to have this particular topic is that we are looking through life through decision making, right? And on whenever I talk about decision making, which is of course my career now, people are either shocked, like that's even a thing, like a career, or they're desperate because they're like, oh my God, I've been bad at decisions the whole time. But the truth of it is human beings make more than 12 million decisions a year. I always assume we are good at making decisions. Why? Because we're not dead. See, I think bad decision makers usually end their lives pretty quick. So I'm assuming we're all good at making decisions. But one of the things I think about decision making is it's so much in the background, in the context of everything we do. We often don't examine how we do it. It's a little bit like breathing. Often we all breathe, oh, well, we all breathe, but often we don't really deal with that the quality of how we breathe decides our life, not if we breathe or not. So in that same way, that's what I'm looking at when I look at decision making. And life is essentially a network of decisions, right? All of the outcomes that ever happen in our lives are a function of action, and right action is dependent on right decision, right? So there's a bit of a flow through there. So even if that's not conscious to you, if you start to look at your life and the outcomes of your life, you'll be able to kind of work backwards and there are decision points along your life where you made a particular decision, right or wrong, and it kind of caused the next step, right? So I like to look through that lens. And just so that everyone's clear, a decision is the act of making or determining a choice or judgment. It is a conclusion, resolution, or solution reached after consideration. And a little aside for all of those people that are worried about technology and AI, as a decision expert, we actually are not confronted, because actually computers don't make decisions. They analyze. Human beings make decisions, right? In fact, not even other animals make decisions. Often they react or they do something like that. Human beings, because of the relationship between the neocortex and the rest of our bodies, that's actually the process by which a decision is made. So I'm not too worried about the future of technology, because the infinite amount of things that go into a decision are truly beyond technology at this point, okay? And for a long while. But anyway, that's really what we're looking at. We're going to look at this conversation through the lens of decision making. And just a little quick overview, because I'm a decision expert, of the principles of decision making. These are best practice decision making principles, which means that as you decide about the next chapter of your life, I'm really asking you to consider these principles as you make those decisions. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the first two, because I actually think that the conversation for designing your next chapter relies more heavily on the second two, but there are four of them. So if there's something that you can hear in this that you want to talk about more, by all means, connect with me in a different conversation. I'm happy to talk about them more. But the four principles are process before content. Often, one of the biggest pitfalls that happens in decision making is that we look at what is the content or the information of the decision before we decide on how we're going to decide. Does that make sense? And I don't know, I mean, we do a lot of work with organizations and with personal individuals, and so many people come to me and talk about the waste of time talking about the nitty-gritty, where the team or the people have not actually decided what is my process by which I'm going to make this decision, right? So one of the things that we always look at is, don't put the cart before the horse. Look at, what is my process going to be? Is it going to be like, the most popular process is, of course, the T, right? Pros and cons, right? And that's fine. But you may have it that you're going to say, this decision that I'm about to make, I'm going to make it based on intuition. That's going to be my process. Or this particular decision, we're going to make it as a group and it's going to be by vote. Or this decision, I'm going to be the authority and have the final say, but I'd like feedback. You know, they're all processes. And if you look at them, the best thing about them is, if you have either a complex decision or you have a decision that has opposing sides, both of you getting on the one side about the process actually now puts you on one team looking at the situation rather than on opposing teams. So that's all I'm going to say about process before content at this stage. The next one is academic rigor. So academic rigor, build your decisions on solid foundations, on methodologies that work and are proven, right? Again, what is the benefit of an academic rigorous process? Well, you can look back at a rigorous process and learn lessons from it. Do you know what I mean? If you're just someone who went, oh, I just felt like it and I bought those $500 pair of shoes, I've been in that category. Often the result of a lack of academic rigor is buyer's remorse, right? Who's had buyer's remorse? Husband's remorse? Oh, no, that's just me. Sorry, joking. But, sometimes when you haven't done the thinking about what really is going on in the background of this decision, often you get an experience of buyer's remorse. And another thing that you may also get is you don't get any follow through, like you don't get implementation of that decision or following through on that decision. So I recommend a bit of academic rigor. These bottom two are the ones we're going to deep dive into, but just a quick cover of them. The principle of making sure that you cover the intangible and tangible values in your decision. It's very important because we're very trained in looking at the tangible values in a decision. What does it cost? What are the resources? That kind of thing. They're very measurable, and it's very easy to kind of make a decision based on the numbers. Does that make sense? But here's the problem with that. The problem with that is, as human beings, what we value is often not easily measurable, right? What we value often shifts in its measures, which means that if we don't look to the intangible values as well, often we'll have a lopsided decision, right? So when we'll have a bit more of a deep dive into intangible values, but when I'm pointing to the difference between a tangible value and an intangible value, let's have a look at the difference between cost and price. See, price is very tangible. A car is $100, it's $100, it's $100. It's the same amount. That's the price of something. But the cost of something is distinct. If it's a billionaire spending the $100, that's a different cost to them, like a different impact to them, to if it's a homeless person spending $100. So you can start to see that $100 is not as simple as just a number. It has values behind it, and we want to really look at those values. Other values that are harder to measure: love, reputation, satisfaction, right? They are harder to measure values, and often in our decision making, especially if we've had a life where we've been worried about the cost, like the financial pricing, we don't look at what is my satisfaction, what is my experience, what is my reputational value, what are those kind of conversations? So we're going to have a look at that one a bit longer. And then the fourth one, just to get the whole circle, is called active stakeholder participation. And this is a tricky one because as human beings, certainly ones that don't want to have discord in our life, we have a tendency not to engage others in our decision-making processes, right? We make them alone. In fact, one of the things for women is we often make some of the biggest decisions in our life alone, right? So I want to point to, what do I mean when I say active stakeholder participation? I mean actually inviting and getting the diversity of view about a decision, right? That's what we're looking for, the diversity of view, rather either than the diversity of people. We're looking for the best decisions are made when we have a lot of different perspectives. So whenever we want to make a decision, even though it's about our life, we're not giving the other people the right to make that decision for us. That's not what I'm saying when I say stakeholder participation. You maintain the authority to make your decision, but your willingness to look from inviting those different views allows you to have more of a 360 perspective of the situation rather than just one view. All right, I'm going to just share a quick example of that. Recently, my daughter and I were talking about my death. I know that's a hard thing to talk about, and hopefully it's not going to be for many, many decades, but we were talking about my death, and I actually asked her, how would she like the celebration of my death to go? Rather than in the past, I've always had a concern about what do I want to happen. I actually was like, well, actually, you should ask her what she wants to happen, right? Since she's going to be kind of left, you could say, in a certain situation, right? And it was really interesting to have a conversation from the point of view, what mattered to her about that situation rather than what mattered to me, right? And while of course I'm the source of my own kind of life, it was lovely to kind of get, oh, these are added things that I could consider that involve other people because I got to see their views. Does that communicate? Anyway, so, oh, I'm sorry, I just dropped my computer. So anyway, so just here, we're going to come back to some of these conversations, but I just wanted to give you a chance to ask any questions or feedback or comments about those principles, best practice decision making. Anyone?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Shona. I really love the distinction between the tangible and the intangible values because quite often I, for myself, would minimize the importance of the intangible. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yes. Oh, great, great. We are going to come back to it because it is a major pitfall in decision making for small and large organizations, right? So it's not just an individual conversation, but well done. Okay, great. Well, let's actually look at when you're making a decision, all decisions have these 4 components. So you want to kind of have in your head that these are the 4 considerations, you could say, of any decision you're making, right? So the first one is, what are my options? Right? What are the outcomes or the solutions that I have out of this decision, right? So that's options and alternatives. The second one is the criteria. And criteria is always about how do I judge between the options. So criteria is always about what do I value that I'm going to use to judge between my options. So you can hear that criteria is really important because it is what allows you to decide between what could be infinite options for life, right? And then there are always, and unfortunately, this is one of the things people forget, there are always trade-offs, right? If you pick one outcome, you then get to not have the other outcomes. That's how a trade-off works. So whenever we're deciding something, we want to be responsible for what we're also deciding not to have. All right. Again, sorry about that, but I do remember that was a hard conversation with me about getting married, was all the things I was giving up rather than all the things I was keeping, like getting. I was like, oh, what am I giving up at that? So the trade-offs. And then the final one is the constraints. All right. What are the constraints or limitations that you have? And Kelly pointed to one, the time and energy. They're now constraints in a way. Sometimes finances are constraints. Sometimes health is a constraint, like the constraints of your life, because rarely is a decision made like you can have anything, right? Usually there are constraints on a decision. So you want to look at those 4 things whenever you're looking at a decision that you're making. Oh my goodness. So this is a lot of background work. I promise you it'll make sense when we start to talk about the next chapter. But each of these things that we're talking about, really you want to be looking at, as I design my next chapter, what am I taking into consideration? So I want to deep dive into that intangible and tangible values principle. Like when you're making a decision, what do you mean by tangible and intangible values? So value is always about the ends, the outcomes, the results that we get out of doing something. We want to look at what is the prize or the value I get out of an outcome. That's what we're meaning when we say value, right? So it's not about just financial things. It's also much wider than that, right? And I think that whenever we have this class in person, one of the things people struggle with is sometimes they're concerned that what they value is embarrassing, or what they value, they don't want to say it out loud, right? And I always use the example of actually my boss, right? Because my boss and I have both own a car, right? I own a little Kia Picanto and he owns a BMW, right? But what's laughable or really demonstrates this value conversation is, what do we value? When I bought my car, what I valued was being able to park. I know, that was it. And a Picanto is a very easy park, right? I did not want to worry about things like whether it got scratched or not. I didn't want to worry about any of that things. I wanted a cheap, parkable car. So I got mine and I'm very happy with it. That was what my criteria was. Now, of course, when you talk to Paul, who owns this racing green, kind of British racing green BMW, right? He's very generous and lets me share what was the criteria or the value that he really had, right? Like what was the real value? And he says, well, look, everybody says BMWs are safe, but the truth of it is once any car goes over a 5-star rating, they're all kind of the same, right? So it's, even though I perhaps told people it was about safety, it really isn't, because a lot of cars are about safety. He said, fundamentally, it's about coolness. What I value is how cool I feel when driving in comparison to the other people on the road. I get in my racing car green BMW and I immediately become more cooler than I've ever been on the planet, right? And while I laugh, because it's like, I so don't care about being cool when driving, I really love that he identified that, because a car is a big investment, right? And if he had bought perhaps a car that didn't give him that experience, he would have had regret or stoicism or something like that every time he got in the car, rather than being really delighted. So for me, it's a good experience called, it's not which car is the best car. It's what value is experienced around each of those cars. Does that make sense? So value refers to the contribution that the option, like which car, the option makes in achieving what you really care about. And for women, I'm going to assert that is a area where we kind of put that behind our children's values a lot of the time, or behind our husband's values, or behind our family or our job, or a lot of other values come before ours. So, you might want to really dig deep to have a conversation, like maybe take some notes, journal. What is it that I actually value? Not what do I think other people think I should value? Does that make sense? So you might want to do that work for yourself after this call. But really, the value relates to the why. And it is really, really important for you, I think, to do that inside of this next chapter. What is going to be my why about this next part of my life? Like, why am I living it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I spending my money where I'm spending it? Why? The why. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about value, right? And then when we talk about intangible values, we're really looking at what is driving our decisions, right? And when you get the balance between tangible and intangible right, you really have an experience of ownership and agency around your decision. So you're empowered to take action around your decisions. So I really, really recommend take all of the different values, the ones that are easy to measure, the ones that are hard to measure, the soft values, the hard values. Look at all of the values from all of the perspectives that you can and be really explicit about what you care about versus what you should care about. Okay? Anybody notice that even this conversation here is a little uncomfortable? Right? Because perhaps you haven't spoken to what you really care about or looked at it for a really long time, or maybe it's changed. I mean, there was a time when my children were all I cared about. And now I notice it's shifting and I'm more concerned about things like independence and health. Right? Okay. So then what is criteria? Because what the value, when you identify value, which is the first part of designing this next part of your life, defining what you value, what you'll get to look, what will arise are my criteria, which is what do I use as my judgment tool, and options will come up. What options do I have and how will I assess between them, right? So the criteria is, I mean, there's lots of words there, but effectively it's used to assess between outcomes, like which path will I follow? Why? So the criteria, you want to start to build what is the criteria by which I judge my decision, right? Now, some of my criteria, just for me, is things like the difference I'm making to the planet. I notice I have a real commitment to leaving a legacy. I noticed recently I've had a huge rise in my feminism. I don't know, I was thinking about the difference that older women make, and I think it's we're the voice, right? And so my feminism and my stand for women's rights has kind of raised, and that's one of my criteria. My health is another criteria that I have when I make decisions, those resources. So you want to look at what are yours. There are no right ones. There are only the ones you value. Okay? Always, whenever you're designing your criteria, look to these are the helpful ones: specific, complete, strategic, concise. You want to really articulate them in a meaningful way to you. What you value, you want to articulate it, because often it occurs as a feeling or it's vague. And the clearer you can articulate a criteria, the easier it is to apply it to any decision. Okay, now the other side, and it was the other principle that we were talking about that I want to kind of deep dive into, because again, it's an area where we often miss in decision making, is stakeholder participation. Now, I want to be really clear that stakeholder participation is not the same as stakeholder management. Often in business, we talk about how we manage stakeholders in our life, to make sure that they're on board, that they don't make a fuss, that all of the reasons why we manage stakeholders. I am talking about the value of having diversity in a decision-making process. That's the point. So when I talk about stakeholders, I'm really looking to what are the benefits in a decision-making process of a stakeholder rather than what's the management of them. So we are looking at a stakeholder is anyone that has a vested interest in any decision. So while you're designing your life, obviously you're a stakeholder, right? But some of the other kinds of stakeholders that you might want to look at are things like experts. Subject matter experts are stakeholders, right? If you're looking at making a decision in money, an expert in money is a stakeholder, right? If you're looking to making a relationship decision, perhaps there's some people, I don't know, your friends, your family, that kind of thing might be stakeholders in a relationship, right? But that's really where we're looking at. And the engagement of stakeholders brings together that diversity of perspective. That's what you want to look at. You want to look at the diversity of perspective, because there really are some things that other people can see that you either don't see for yourself, or you you don't, maybe you haven't considered it, or you don't think it's valuable. An example is whenever I'm talking about my life and my career, my daughter, I have a daughter and a son, but it's usually my daughter, speaks up and stands for my commitment to travel. Right? She kind of goes, remember, whatever you're about to do, remember, you love traveling and you get mean when you don't do it. Right? And so that's that diversity of view, because often when I'm making decisions, I forget that I love travel.
Yeah.
Right? Or like that. So there are many ways that those diversity of views can happen to you. Another one could be something like, currently I'm paying off my mortgage, and sometimes I get a little bit sooky about it and whingy, and she might say something like, you don't have to live there. And I'm like, what? Because I've gotten stuck in that mindset of I have to pay the mortgage, and that kind of drivenness. And she reminds me, the mortgage is my choice. The house is my choice. I could make a different choice, right? And she even has a little bit of fun with me. She even reminds me that my same house in Bali would cost $65,000. So she's always like, if you wanted to fly to go live in Bali and fly back, you could do that. Anyway, so that stakeholder conversation, I think, is a very important one. And what there is to do is to provide opportunities for your stakeholders to contribute, right? So maybe that means having a regular meeting with your stakeholders, or maybe it's a one-off that you have now where you really say, hey, I'm thinking about designing my life. I wanted your feedback or your contribution to what you think is important to me, what you think is important to you, what do you think I value. While I'm going to keep making the decisions, I want you to know that your contribution is going to support me in making that decision. I will consider it. And what I've found from that is, as long as you set it up properly so they don't think that they're the end decision maker.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's my son. He thinks he's the end decision maker when we talk. But as long as you set that up properly, my experience is most stakeholders want to be engaged and heard. That's actually what they want, right? So being involved in conversations is actually enough for most stakeholders. And the outcome, of course, is you get a better decision, but fundamentally you also get ownership and agency. See, in my life, I have had a number of people die, and the amount of upset that happens after someone's died amongst the family because there's a difference of opinion. There's a real opportunity in this engagement of stakeholders in both the life you're having and the one after, kind of in you being able to align people first. Like in these conversations, have your stakeholders align so that there isn't any upset because of different assumptions, different concerns, different commitments. Do you know what I mean? Or even just not knowing. People don't know what you want or what you wanted. And that also includes conversations for aging. As you get older and you become less dependent, getting really clear now with them about how you'd like those future to be. Does that communicate? My mother is currently 88, and so she's reaching a level of life where she's not as independent as she was. And what's been really interesting is, of course, she's an absolute refusal to go into any kind of shared living. So it would have been much easier if we'd had conversations about her independence 10, 20 years ago than now, while she's not as cognitive as she was. Now it's a fight, it's almost like a fight and a threat to her, any sort of support we want to give her. Where if we kind of even had a letter that she wrote herself from 15 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been a much better conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway, so really using your stakeholders to get that diversity and that alignment is a very, very smart idea in any decision process, as long as you hold on to the decision authority. You're the one that's going to make the decision about your life, right?
Shona, we have just over 5 minutes, probably about
Perfect.
7 or 8 minutes before we start questions.
Thank you so much. I'm kind of on the track, I think.
Okay.
So thanks for that, though. But anyway, so those two there, I think, are the really important ones: the intangible values and the stakeholder participation in our lives. So designing the next chapter, right? So I have a game or a possibility or a purpose that I invented when I turned 50, which was 50 to 100. That's what I decided to design as the next chapter of my life. What was 50 to 100 gonna look like? Right? My daughter, who's a doctor, she said we're all living to 100. Okay, sorry. So, and she did. She said, we can keep you alive to 100. How you live that life, that's unfortunately your problem. So I decided to design that, and I wanted to just bring together all those different conversations I've spoken about. The first one is consider your changes in value, right? In my 20s and 30s, it was all about making money and creating our foundation of safety for my family. Now it's more about the enjoyment of life and the difference and the legacy I'm making, right? My values shifted from, I used to drink, way too much and smoke. I know, how disgusting. But now I'm very committed to my health, because getting old and being unhealthy is a very hard choice to live with. Consider and confront your constraints and trade-offs, right? Are you willing to trade off? I'm choosing to work probably past retirement age because I really love my job, but how I work is really altering, right? I've already got in place with my boss that I will, over the next 5 to 10 years, I will stop being in the office so much. I will be given projects that are not so time dependent, like 9 to 5. I'd be looking at projects that really work to my strengths and not have jobs that are kind of admin-y or any of that. I kind of work to what I love. So that's the trade-offs, and what I'm trading off is I'm trading off promotion, right? I'm like, I don't really need another promotion. I'd rather have the freedom, right? So you can hear the trade-offs. And the constraints I have is I'm a little on the spectrum. And so sometimes I have a job and where I can say to my boss, actually, I've used up all my words. I can't come into work. And he goes, okay, work from home. Like, there's that freedom to do that. That's my constraint, rather than soldiering on, which is what I used to do when I was younger. Widening my options really is, well, even this conversation here, I wasn't really someone who wanted, like, I was a speaker so much. This has now become an option for Bonnie and I. We've really been looking at how do we take on being known in the world and how we want to be known. And part of it is this kind of making a difference at a social enterprise level. Defining my criteria really did shift. In fact, I was quite shocked at how much I wanted to shift. The biggest one is relationship. I'll just tell you the truth. I noticed that when I was in my 20s and 30s, my list of what I wanted in my partner were very rigid and hard, and mostly were in the world of how attractive they were and how financially secure they were. Sorry, I wanted good-looking children and I wanted a safe place to raise my good-looking children. Sorry, that's just me. But now my criteria in a relationship is they got to make me laugh. That's it. I don't need them to build my house. I don't need them to give me children. I don't need any of that. What I need is to enjoy them. So to be honest, when I meet people, might meet potential relationships, I'm looking for, do I enjoy this person? Rather than, are they kind of useful in building my future? If that communicates, right? So it's a different conversation for me, even in relationships, right? So define your criteria is very important. And then involve your stakeholders. Involve the people in your life and the experts in your life in the dream you're building, right? Like, get yourself a great community that support you in designing that chapter and what it is you want to have in your life. So really, I think that's where we are at the end of. I wanted to give you a quick look at the kinds of books if you want to deep dive a little bit into decision making. These are the kinds of books. So The Decision Maker, Hard Decisions Made Easy, Thinking Fast and Slow. Decisive is a very easy read if you're just beginning. It's a nice, easy application. And Cynefin is really, it's incredibly useful, but probably a little bit more technical. So that would probably be, that's probably the harder end, right? And then the final thing I wanted to kind of give you was a diagnostic. So this is just like a free resource, if you like. If you, what do? Scan that code. That code will lead you to a diagnostic that you can identify and assess your strengths and weaknesses in decision making. So you're going to be able to, if at the end of the diagnostic, you can kind of notice if what's required is for you to look for a methodology by which you make a decision, or what's required is that you really look at what is my process of decision making, or what's required is more stakeholders, or what's required is a deeper dive into that value conversation, right? So that's just a diagnostic tool for anyone that's interested in this conversation. And
where do we find that? I can't see the QR
isn't it on the screen?
I can't see the screen. Am I the only one that can't see the screen? Am I?
I can see it.
Okay, it's just me. I must be on my view. Okay, good.
Okay.
We can send it to you, Faith.
Yeah,
we'll send it to you.
It'll be there. And look, that's just a free resource for anyone to kind of. One of the biggest things we say about decision making is the shift from unconscious to conscious is the biggest transformation.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to have decision making be something, you got to move it from that reactive kind of background. It just happens, and whatever the habits you have that from the past will make the new habit, like make the new decision. And you want to move it to a conscious place where you can really own it and design it, right? So that assessment will allow you to do that. Now, as I said, Catalyze is a social enterprise, right? So we have a lot of opportunity. We want to make a difference to the decision making of the planet. We measure ourselves against the UN goals, and we are really standing for that. There are enough resources in the world for all people. And the problem is the decision-making practices are poor. And that's at a very large level and at an individual level. And our premise is if we can elevate how people make decisions, the outcomes of those decisions really will impact all, if not most, of the world's problems.
Yeah.
Right? So the reason I say that is because I want you to know that if you connect with me, join us on LinkedIn or anything like that, there's no obligation. We just want a community of people interested in decision making, and we want to be able to continue to elevate that conversation across the planet. So if you do join in with me. That's kind of, I don't have a lot of other interests, to be honest. But by all means, I love this particular field, so you should definitely join with me on that. Okay, any questions? Because that's the end of me. I've got no more slides. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, so anyone else, any questions? I'm trying to see everyone. Just please feel free to unmute yourself. And just while, we're getting questions, I just wanted to add, I love how what you talked about your neurodiversity, understanding your constraints like that. We have to know what the constraints are so we know what changes, we need to make. So I love how you had that clarity. So therefore you could ask for what you needed. So that was great.
Absolutely. Especially since in neurodiversity, our limitations become more prevalent as we age. I don't think I have any, like, I don't cater to limitations, but I notice that energy and time that Kelly was speaking about, I used to spend quite a bit of that on managing the neurodiversity, you could say. And now I don't have that energy and time. I now am like, I don't want to have my time on that. I want it on what I love, which means I then manage it more as a constraint than I used to.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, but thank you. Any other questions? Any insights
questions or comments? Yeah.
Insights or feedback?
I would like to add, I like the idea of having a diverse, different views rather than different people, because I think we've all got a bit of an echo chamber sometimes, and our friends are very alike in values and things. So I really picked up the idea of you're looking for different views, not just different people's ideas.
Very good. Yes, and it also allows us to kind of do a little bit of the 6 hats. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can even if the decision is a very personal one, like you really are afraid to share it or you don't have it, the idea of is it De Martini or De Bono? De Bono.
Edward De Bono.
Yeah, De Bono's 6 hats. Like put on your positive optimistic hat and then write down all the views about the decision, and then take that one off and put on your creative hat and write down all the views about it, and then put on your pessimistic black hat and write down all the views about it, like that. Like, really, you can use it or research from those views yourself to a certain degree. I still encourage other people, but you can do it if you have to. Well done. Excellent. Anyone else?
Can we just maybe just room for one more before we wrap up? One more person who wants to add their view or just even an insight that came through today. Just unmute yourself. Yeah, go, Eve.
I was just wondering about the confidence angle on this. I think a lot of women don't have that confidence in themselves to make decisions. Can you speak a bit about that? And as we age, do we get better at the confidence or worse?
Okay, so everyone's different, okay? So that's the first thing. So don't say anything that I'm saying is like a rule, right? But I do notice that post-menopause, right, my giver Fness what became much less. I got way less concerned about other people's opinion of me after menopause, right? That's my own personal conversation. So in a way, you could say my willingness to be confident got more, right? However, I think that a lot of my confidence happens in the following of the principles, that these are best practice decision making. This is best practice. This is not my opinion. This is the best practice, these 4 principles. So when I follow them, I have confidence that I've done the work. Does that make sense? So I'm not relying on my opinion or feeling of confidence. I'm relying on a tried, 30 years of, science and social process rather than